Let's talk to Mr. Greg Swenson. He's a foreign affairs analyst and also an economist. Mr. Greg Swenson, welcome to the broadcast. What do you make of this escalation so far?
Not surprised. It's we don't know yet what the outcome will be and what some of the repercussions will be. But I'm not that surprised because the regime, the mullahs did the same thing back in 2020 when the president or the United States had eliminated General Soleimani, and they had somewhat more like token response to it. And that's what I hope this is. I think if they're actually thinking they can get into a fight with the United States, I think that would be a grave mistake. So I think this might just be a bit of a token response to satisfy the particularly radical supporters that they have in Iran, that the regime has, to make it look like they've actually done something or they did retaliate. But I think it's fairly decorative or theatrical at this point.
Theatrical, Mr. Greg? Because I think Iran did indicate that it will strike U.S. bases in this Gulf states. And they actually called Trump's statement of peace a bluff.
Yeah, that's funny. So, look, I don't know what the outcomes are yet. It's too early to tell if any of these missiles have actually struck targets. If there's any, obviously, if there's any injuries, that will be a completely different story. But what I'm suggesting right now is the mullahs felt compelled to make some sort of retaliatory response. In the past, those retaliations have been performative at best. They know that they can't beat the U.S. in any sort of a conflict. They can't even beat Israel, a much smaller country, a much smaller military than the United States. So this would be a suicide pact if they're actually trying to escalate. Again, in my view, they're just trying to demonstrate some sort of retaliation to satisfy their particularly radical supporters, which there are fewer and fewer of in Iran, and surely they're being more isolated in the region as well.
Talking about the region, how should the region behave or act going forward after this has happened?
Yeah, I think that, again, it's just further isolating Iran. I mean, they've lost their proxies. You've seen very little from the Houthis, from Hezbollah, and of course, Assad is no longer in Syria. So, the Iranians, or the regime, I should say, specifically, the regime does not have the capabilities that they had, even 18 months ago. And of course, Israel has done a phenomenal job in taking out a lot of their missile batteries, a lot of their air defense systems. So, they're not only isolated militarily, but I think most of the region, in spite of some of the public statements, are worried, have been worried about Iran and about the volatility in Iran for generations now, for decades. And so I think most of the countries in the region will be quite pleased to see the nuclear capabilities removed from Iran, and the world is a much less dangerous place right now.
Mm-hmm. President Trump did indicate that he knew about the repercussions of striking Fordo, Isfahan, and also Natanz. He did say that he was expecting some sort of reaction from Iran. He also did warn Iran that if you escalate or if you retaliate, we will retaliate even bigger. But America right now is on tenterhooks. Do you believe that Donald Trump made the right decision?
Yeah, absolutely. I think I haven't seen any polling yet, but I think that he'll have overwhelming support for this, especially from his own party, of course. And there will be some partisan response. The Democrats will naturally criticize or condemn anything that President Trump did. I assure you, if Barack Obama or Joe Biden had launched or approved those strikes on Saturday, they would have supported them. So there's a bit of partisanship here. But no, I think the Americans are relieved that finally a president has actually done something about the mullahs trying to attain nuclear a nuclear bomb. And, Hillary Clinton in 2008, Barack Obama while he was president, and especially Joe Biden more recently, stated publicly on many occasions, Iran cannot have a nuclear bomb. And they did nothing about it, unfortunately. If anything, they helped fund the mullahs with their proxy wars and their nuclear development. So, President Trump is a little different than other presidents. He actually does what he says he's going to do, and that's really refreshing. So, look, nobody wanted this strike to happen. We all wanted the mullahs to agree to dial down their nuclear arms development peacefully and diplomatically. And President Trump offered that for several months, and the mullahs refused. So this was the only outcome, but it's a refreshing outcome given the appeasement over the last 4 years and of course earlier in this century.
Well, Mr. Greg Swenson, stay with me because we are receiving more information in our newsroom as we speak, and Israel has actually put out a statement as we speak. I'll just read to you part of the statement being given by the military spokesperson, Brigadier General F.E. Defrin, who says Israel will continue to strike at every level of Iranian regime involved in plans that threaten the state of Israel. And this is the latest information that we are getting in our newsroom at this hour on what is happening or what is currently happening in Iran or in Qatar. And Al Udeid Air Base in Qatar was attacked by short-range and medium-range ballistic missiles originating from Iran. And this is according to a U.S. defense official who said on Monday, after Iran struck Qatar, he says that Al Udeid Air Base in Qatar was attacked by short-range and medium-range ballistic missiles originating from Iran. Iranian officials gave Qatar advance notice of an attack before launching missiles towards a U.S. military base in the country, and that's according to a source familiar with the matter. The coordination was intended to minimize casualties and preserve an off-ramp. Now, a U.S. official also says that they are not aware of any U.S. injuries or deaths in the reported attack on Al Udeid Air Base. Qatar's defense ministry said on Monday that its air defenses intercepted an Iranian missile attack on the airbase. Greg Swenson is a foreign affairs analyst and also an economist. He's still with us. Mr. Greg, I just read to our audience the military response from Israel, and what they say is that Israel will continue to strike at every level of Iranian regime involved in plans that threaten the state of Israel. Israel's objectives from the get-go was to eliminate Iran's nuclear capabilities. America did that for them. Do you think the continuous bombing of Israel to Iran is justified?
Well, I think the Israelis have been completely justified in attacking Iran's ballistic missile batteries as well as any of their air defense batteries. Look, Iran fired 400 missiles into Israel over the last year, 300 in one day. So the aggressor here clearly is Iran. They've been funding their proxy groups, Hamas, Hezbollah, and the Houthis, for many years to attack Israel, to attack America and American assets in the region. So clearly, the Iranian regime is the guilty party here. So Israel has every right, and I'm glad that they're defending themselves, but also being aggressive to limit the capabilities of the regime to continue these attacks. Now, the regime also fired on U.S. air bases in Syria and Iraq 350 times during the last 4 years of the Biden administration. They fired on Saudi energy assets. You know, these are very aggressive people. They have not worked well in the neighborhood. That's probably an understatement. So it's to everyone's benefit, especially Israel's, but it's really to everyone's benefit that Israel makes it impossible, or at least very difficult, for the mullahs to continue with this aggressive behavior.
Mr. Greg Swenson, stay with me. Qatar has condemned Iran for attacking the US's Al Udeid air base. They call it a flagrant violation of Qatar's sovereignty and even airspace. Mr. Greg, what can Gulf states do at this moment to avert a catastrophe from happening?
It's a great question. I think they've been quite diplomatic about it over the last few years and even the last few weeks. And you saw public statements from the Gulf states that criticized the U.S. for, so-called escalation. But behind closed doors, in private conversations, and I'm quite confident the conversations between the leadership of the Gulf states with the White House, with the U.S. administration, I'm quite confident those have been encouraging. And everyone is benefiting from the elimination of the regime's capabilities to develop nuclear weapons. Everyone wants that. I don't think there's anyone that does not want regime change. That's not suggesting that the U.S. or anyone else should force that regime change, because we've learned our lessons from Iraq and Afghanistan and Libya. But I think the sentiment is very much where the mullahs, the regime, has been isolated. And I don't think there's anyone in the region that would support them.
Breaking news coming in at this hour. Mr. Greg, stay with me again. Iran says the missile barrage on Qatar was the same number of bombs used by the United States on its nuclear sites, now signaling a likely desire to de-escalate. Reports say Trump administration was aware in advance of Iran's attack on Al Udeid air base. Iran informed U.S. via 2 diplomatic channels hours ahead of attacks on Qatar. Tehran also informed Doha. Iranian government sources have told WION that Iran informed Qatar in advance to minimize casualties that might have happened. Now, WION has been exclusively told by Iran government sources that Qatar had prior intimation of the attacks. Reports also indicate that Iran informed the Qatari government in advance of the missile strikes on the U.S. airbase in Qatar. Advance warning was reportedly given to minimize casualties. This is in line with Qatar's statement, which says the base had been evacuated earlier following established security and precautionary measures given the tensions in the region. Qatar stated that all necessary steps were taken to ensure the safety of personnel at the base, including Qatari armed forces members, friendly forces, and others. We confirmed that no injuries or human casualties resulted from the attack. Mr. Greg Swenson, America did do the right thing by evacuating their citizens way before time, and we do understand that America or the United States did issue evacuation orders prior to this attack. Should the same be done to other Gulf states?
I would hope so if the regime plans on attacking the other Gulf states. Now, I think much of this is because they want this retaliation to be performative. They need to do this to satisfy the radical extremists that actually support them, in spite of the fact that fewer and fewer people are actually behind the regime. I'm quite sure that 80% of Iranians would love to see regime change and don't support the regime or the mullahs. So, look, this is performative. They are basically firing some missiles to make it look good for the radical extremists that support them. But they know that if they actually injured any American or Qatari or anybody in the region, if they actually did any damage, that would end up being the end of the regime, because the retaliation from the U.S. would be massive. And we saw what happened over the weekend. The U.S. has the capability to crush the regime if they chose to. We don't want to. That's not why we're in the Middle East. But we will take action if our soldiers, our brave young soldiers, are at risk, or our military assets. But I think these strikes, these retaliatory strikes today, are performative. They feel like they need to do it to satisfy their supporters. But I would hope that none of them actually strike. And again, this is what happened in 2020 when they had the performative retaliation after the killing of General Soleimani.
Swenson, We'll have to leave it there. Thank you very much for talking to WION World is One today,
you.
and it's good to see you.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.